Here. I could see her. She waved. Good and bad, depending on the moment. She's still maybe having to go to the hospital, so maybe tomorrow. She just doesn't like to go. And Dad's on his way in. Picking up breath. In the social hall. I took our trash. 750 pounds worth of the road just now.
Lots of weeds and sticks in the stove.
What?
Weeds and sticks. Forgot to.
That chicken was great. We ate some last night though.
Is it? I just stuck it in the freezer, but I had to go do something else, so I couldn't deal with it.
She's gonna house down.
Oh.
Gonna have to go to the doctor, but he's gonna lecture about his sugar. He's gonna have to eat Meals on Wheels
Oh, no.
exclusively. Well, if he eats anything else, his sugar goes way up. If he eats Meals on Wheels, it stays normal.
It's so funny.
He said his kidneys could fail. I said at 83 years old, he'll need to be in dialysis. So,
Yeah, something got changed. Ain't when.
that's my future too.
Well, we just have to believe everything is not hereditary, like they say.
A lot of it is.
Yeah, that's true. I marinated some chicken. I was thinking potato, dressing. And I kind of steamed it a little bit in the frying pan.
That sounds good.
We used to do that on the grill, but we're not used to buying no sorry grill. Whatever I can cook, I can do on the stove.
I like it.
Yeah, I used to, 7:30 in the morning, I'd be grilling. Since it tore up, and it's not perfect. They don't jack it.
No, we try to invite people over when we do, and then get there late.
Oh, it's a lot of fun, but it's a lot of work too.
Yeah.
We got one too many jobs. We do none of them.
Well, my cousin Cynthia, my mother's second oldest sister, daughter, she never married. She stayed with them. She and her brother Richard, who passed away a few years ago, pancreatic cancer. But the whole family, she had 9 children, they had children, grandchildren had children. The whole family would come there for Thanksgiving. And it would be like 4 turkeys and, 11 pans of dressing, and everybody be eating. I watched one time we were there, and Cynthia never, I don't think she sat down to eat a thing or said anything like she was ever there. I said,
It happens.
yeah, it really does.
Gotta make everybody else happy.
Yeah, it seems like it. All right, it's time to begin. Dad, would you lead us for a prayer, please?
Our Lord, most gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for this privilege to study your word. We ask you to be with us, help us to understand it as we study it, to apply it to our daily living. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. All right, now, Matthew 10:26. Do not fear them. For there is nothing concealed that will not be revealed, or hidden that will not be known. What I tell you in the darkness, tell in the light. and what you hear whispered in your ear proclaim on the housetops. And do not be afraid of those who kill the body, but are unable to kill the soul. Rather fear him who is able to destroy both soul and body in hell. Okay. One thing we've talked about that plenty, just to kind of review. The early Christians took this to heart. They truly believed in the afterlife, that they would have a life in heaven. And in the first and second century, somebody's here. Is that Vicky?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wait.
Okay.
Hey,
Hello.
how are you?
A second ago, I was fine.
What happened?
I lifted up my purse, my heavy purse and my heavy Bible,
Okay.
and now I'm walking like this.
You hurt your back?
I don't know. Just weird. I think it was because I laid down I went kayaking today.
Oh, well.
Oh, wow.
And I think when I got home, I was really tired because we stayed about 4 hours. So I laid on the sofa, and you know how that crooks your head?
I think your problem might have more to do with the personal Bible than something else. All right. The reason I read that again is, don't be afraid of those who kill the body. The early Christians really took this to heart. And I can only tell you the legends. I told you the story of Polycarp. There was another guy, I can't remember his name. He wanted to be a martyr, and the Roman officials happened to be in town, rounded up Christians. His mother had to hide his clothes so that he wouldn't go out and turn himself in as a Christian. I mean, it was, people really believed it in those days. They believed in the afterlife, and they wanted the afterlife. And there was a maybe somewhat misguided belief in the early church that if you died as a martyr, that was a sure ticket into heaven. And probably so. Probably most of the people that did, that probably was it. And they did. They did not fear the Romans. They did not fear the Jews. They wholeheartedly accepted their punishment as a rule. I'm sure there were exceptions, but as a rule, they accepted the punishment. They accepted death. They went cheerfully into death, both Roman and other kinds. And in fact, all of the apostles, except for John, died a horrible death at the hands of people for the faith. And John was imprisoned from where he wrote. Remember that from where he wrote Revelation from. Patmos is a Roman prison. It's an island prison colony. But now it gets a little bit better at the end rather than rather than that part. In verse 29, are not sparrows not sold for a denarii, and yet not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father. But even the hairs of your head are all counted, so do not fear. You are more valuable than a great number of sparrows. All right, 2 sparrows not sold for an assarion. And I meant to do this before tonight, but I didn't, and so I'm going to do it now. What is an assarion? I know it's a small coin, but I want to find out exactly how much it was worth.
It says a penny in my Bible.
As what?
It says a penny.
It is, well, more probably translated as sorry because that was what it originally, because the penny didn't exist in ancient, but yeah, that's probably right.
Something kind of like.
Getting very, very slow for some reason, the load. All right, what is an assarion? Here it is. Of all places, Wikipedia. Roman era coinage, imperial era coinage. Doesn't say how much it was worth. But it was, okay, a denarius was a day's wage, and a Asarian at first was 10 Asarians made a denarius, so it's a tenth of a day's wage. So that's about a penny. It's not much. Let's see. I'm trying to find out exactly what it was worth. Okay, you could buy, it's about a penny. You could buy 2 sparrows for a cent or 5 sparrows for 2 cents. Okay. So that's it. So a penny probably. It's not worth very much, and yet, if one of these birds falls to the ground, God knows about it. And he even says in verse 30, the hairs of your head are all counted. I do not know anybody today who, even somebody who's nearly bald, who knows the exact numbers of hairs on someone's head. And modern science makes it even more difficult because it says that they vary from moment to moment, how many hairs you have, because you're constantly losing them and constantly sprouting more. Do not fear, you are more valuable than a great number of sparrows. God cares for you, is basically what he's saying. And he's using this kind of very flowery language that people will remember it. God cares for you. You're more valuable than a sparrow, and yet not one falls to the ground that God doesn't know about. And even the hairs of your head are all counted. And you're more valuable than all that stuff. In verse 32, therefore everyone who confesses me before people, I will also confess him before my Father who is in heaven. But whoever denies me before people, I will also deny him before my Father who is in heaven. Do not think that I came to bring peace in the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I came to turn a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and a person's enemies will be the members of his own household. Now, verse 32 and 33 is this thing that I had even said this could be typical of the 6th and final step for plan of salvation. If you confess me before people, I will also confess you before my Father who is in heaven. Have any of you ever seen an old movie adaptation of the story of Robin Hood? I mean, Sean Connery is in it. He plays Richard the Lionheart. Robin Hood made Marion, or getting married, in front of Friar Tuck, out in the Sherwood Forest where nobody can find them because they're all outlaws. The king comes up and they ask, who are you? And he said, I have come to rid this forest of outlaws. So everybody draws their swords. And he pulls back his hood, and it is Richard the Lionheart, the king, and he absolves them of all their sins and things like that. So, and the only thing I'm trying to say about this is, in the end of that movie, I think it was a Cecil B. DeMille movie, I'm not sure about that, but it could have been, because his endings are always like that. All of these people are hiding in Sherwood Forest because they're outlaws. They're going to be, they're captured, they're going to be killed. All of a sudden, the king walks in, and they're not outlaws anymore. Everything changes in a moment. That's kind of the picture I get of this. If anyone confesses me before people, I will also confess him before my Father who is in heaven. So, in the Robin Hood movie, these people, if we actually extended the ending, and these people get behind the king and go into Nottingham, the nearest city, the sheriff comes out to arrest them, and the king says, no, these are my people. That's the end. It's over. In the same way, if you confess me before people, I will also confess them before my Father who is in heaven. That means that if you come before God and you have confessed me before people, I will confess you before him. Which means, and where do we usually find, or in what walk of life do we usually find confess? In what other walk of life? Yeah, in court, right? In court. So the image that is here is God is the judge and Jesus is our attorney. Jesus is our intermediary between God and us. So if you will confess me, I will confess him before my Father who is in heaven. Which is more important to us? Us to confess him before men, or for Christ to confess us before his Father?
People. You don't do one, you don't get the other.
Right. And you have to have the other. I mean, that's just given. I mean, you have to have the other. You have to have, in fact, there's no other way we're going to get into heaven rather than that happens. You know, he's one of mine. She's one of mine. That's how you get into heaven. And the opposite is true. Whoever denies me before people, I will also deny him before my Father who is in heaven. Who is the big poster child in the Testament for denial of Christ? Who did it? And went out and wept bitterly.
Judas.
Mm-hmm.
Peter.
Peter, yeah.
Peter.
Simon Peter did.
Yeah.
Now, he's here listening to this. Why do you think he wept bitterly?
I'm ashamed.
And he remembers this. You know? I did it. And oddly enough, he did do it. But he did it within moments or within hours or a couple hours. Of saying, even if all will fall away, I will never cease from following. Even if all fall away, I'll never. He even says, even if I must die, I will continue to follow. And he, to our knowledge, is the first one to deny. Of all of them. I think they all did at one time. But this is just, and this is again just how my mind works. Think of Peter hearing this and remembering this. Then that cryptic thing that actually makes sense if you look at John 22. Peter and Jesus walking on the, and he had to affirm him 3 times. Think of Peter later on in life as he goes about the world teaching the gospel. Who, above all, or who could better tell people what this means than the Apostle Peter? About denying Christ. And there's not, I don't think, going to be as poignant an instance, but there is going to be more numerous ones as the years go by for people to be able to deny Christ. There's people like Peter and Matthew and the rest of these. They're telling them the awful penalties of doing it and also telling them the rewards for not doing it. Verse 34, I don't think people understood it in that day, but we understand it today. Do not think that I came to bring peace on the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I came to turn a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and a person's enemies will be members of his household. Not only did that happen very quickly after Jesus says this, but it also happens today. When I was a little boy, early teens, our Sunday school teacher told us a story that he knew. And whether it's true or not, he believed it to be true. And I imagine it was. A young man came to the United States to study, and while he was here, he was converted to the Baptist church. He thought he was going, yeah, that was the way to go. But since he was from Latin America, guess what his family was?
Yeah.
Yeah, extremely, very militantly Roman Catholic. His parents' home was shot at. You know, things were thrown in their yard and things like that because, you know, of what he had done here in the United States. This still happens today. The worst fight or the worst argument that I've ever seen my mother engaged in was over religion with her sister-in-law. The girl actually married her brother, was her best friend in high school. They were lifelong friends. And they got into a huge, remember that day at Ichi's? That was the worst fight I think I've ever seen my mother get into with anyone, an argument anyway. And that was her sister-in-law. How many of us have had trouble with our own family, in our own household, over our commitment to Christianity, or Christ, our religion, whatever you want to call it? We all have. Every one of us has. Oddly enough, about a decade later, maybe even more, I preached a sermon, a couple of them, at the little church there in that town. And she and my uncle both came to hear me preach. Which, if you knew them, that was a big thing, you know? That was a big, big thing. I don't think Mother was there. I was just kind of, they were in between preachers and they asked me to come because I was one of their elders' nephews and stuff. So I came one Sunday and Sunday evening, and they came. They didn't go to their, well, they were Free Will Baptists. They didn't go to their church that night. They came to ours and heard me preach and said, and both of them said how much they enjoyed it. I don't think they ever went back, but still, that was a big step, you know, for them. And I appreciate it. I told them that several times. But oddly enough, I mean, this is true even today. It was certainly true in the first century and the early church, first 3 centuries really, when there was persecution, but it was even more true today. This happened over and over and over and over and over again. Let's not over that. What happened to, at the end of the Middle Ages, what happened to Martin Luther, John Calvin, and Zwingli, and all these other guys? You know, Martin Luther was excommunicated, and they demanded his return to Rome to die, or to be executed for heresy. As was Calvin and Zwingli, you know, they were enemies. Even today, Christianity is still illegal in places. Look at what Tom goes through, you know. And Abbassiana is having trouble that I don't really know completely about, because Abbassiana is, he's kind of not able to talk all that much. You know? He's, because of the way the internet goes there and the way that it's monitored. So he has to be careful. So look at what they go through even today. When Jesus says, I did not come to bring peace but a sword, and I came to, he's not saying this is what I want to happen. He said this is what's going to happen. Why is this going to happen?
Change status quo.
Yeah. You're calling for change. And people have, for centuries in this day and time, people have for centuries made money off and made their position off the status quo, the way things have always been. And they weren't willing to give that up. You know, 100 years after this there's gonna be a very bizarre guy, and one night when we have time, I'll tell you about it. One of the most strangest guys through history because of the life he lived. He was a Jewish general in the Bar Kokhba rebellion after Christ against the Romans. He was captured and became a Roman general and wound up living in the home of the Roman emperor. His name was Josephus, and when he became the Roman emperor's adopted son, he became Flavius Josephus, in a Roman name. For many reasons, he wrote a very, very exhaustive history of the Jews. Now, Josephus was writing during a time where he could not have known Jesus. But when Josephus was a little boy, the older people of his day would have been there during the time of Jesus, at least at the end of his life. Josephus gives, out of this huge volume of what's called his Antiquities, he gives one line, maybe two sentences to Jesus. It says, Jesus of Nazareth was the Messiah, and our leaders, because of jealousy, crucified him. And that was it. It was an open, by Josephus' time, about 100 years after this, by Josephus' time, it was an open secret, it was an open fact that Jesus was the Son of God, which makes me wonder why, at Jesus' day and time, why if 100 years after Jesus or so, it's obvious that Jesus was the Christ, the Son of God. Why wasn't it obvious then?
I think it was,
I'm sure it was.
with the way they talked, but it was power,
Yeah, why
standing in the community.
wasn't it accepted as obvious? And I think you're right. It's what he said, the status quo. The way things have always gone. Yeah, the way things have always gone. And I don't want to get political, but, and I've noticed here lately that what used to be the enemy has now turned out to be the ally. I remember this a while ago, where these alternative forms of energy can replace gasoline, fossil fuels. And it used to be the big oil companies and the big car manufacturers were against it completely. Now, why were they against it? In a way, I was against the way that the tree huggers were wanting to do it, because you've got all these maybe hundreds of thousands of auto workers and petroleum engineers and things like that, petroleum workers who would suddenly be out of a job. You can't do it overnight, but to slowly phase it in, that's what I can see. But they were against it. But have you noticed now, the big petroleum manufacturers and refiners are kind of turning that way? And Ford and GM have both pledged to not make gas cars anymore in about 25 years. But they're slowly switching. They want their plants to be all electric and this, that, and the other, and not run off stuff. So, change takes place in our society, but it takes place very, very slowly. If you want to change society, it takes very societal change slowly. And oddly enough, this changed. Well, after 300 AD, Christianity is going to be the only religion tolerated in Rome. It's it. You can't, it's no longer, the persecutions end. And the church is allowed to flourish. And in fact, the emperor becomes a member. And he establishes the church as the church of Rome. and also the Church of Constantinople, which lasts a lot longer than Rome. But it happens. It happens slowly. So persecutions like we know, this overt persecution is going to replace the covert persecutions by the government. Even though there still is some government persecution of the church all over the world in many different places. Let's see. Can we quit here? Because my voice is actually now starting to hurt.
Something's wrong with mine.
I don't know if it's me just getting over this or me allergic to Georgia this time of year. You have
Not going away either.
pollen and stuff? Well, I went to an allergist, and my allergist said that I was not allergic to pollen. But, and so he gave me shots for dust mites, and I can't tell the difference. I'm glad it's all over with. For like 2 or 3 years, I had to go through these shots, and it was a waste of time. But my primary, when I told him, and he's the one that sent me to this allergist. I told him about it. He said, well, yeah. He said, all of us have it, even if you're not allergic to it. We're just so over, what's the word? We're just inundated with it. You know, it's just everywhere. We're overloaded, our systems are, with this pine pollen twice a year. And we all have it, even he does. And he's not allergic either. I'm not allergic to it, but it just kills me.
I was until they took my appendix out.
Really?
And I posed that to several doctors and nobody cared, but I had no allergies till my appendix was out. And I
You
said,
know, that
I wonder if that was the connection, because mine was not a bad one. Mine was, they took it because they did a hysterectomy.
Mhm.
And he said, why not? I said, okay. But from then on, I had, but oddly enough, mine are when it rains more than pollen.
That kind of makes sense, because the appendix is supposed to take poisons out of the blood, and it won't anymore. Maybe that was taking that out of your blood too,
I wonder.
you know? It kind of, what little I know about that field. Unfortunately, my doctor is being able to make sure your kids can read. Has nothing to do with that. All right, what's your invitation song?
41.
41. I don't know how much singing I'll be able to do. I tell you, Sunday after that second sermon, I can't hardly talk. This goes away. In a minute, we'll be singing number 41, and if anyone at home or here stands in need of respond to this invitation, please come together, we stand as we sing.
We have heard the joyful sound. Jesus saved, Jesus saved. Spread the tidings all around. Jesus saved, Jesus saved. Spread the news to every land. Climb the steeps and cross the waves. Onward is our Lord's command. Jesus saves, Jesus saves.
Shall we pray? Almighty God, Father of all, we thank you for this day and all its many blessings. We ask, Heavenly Father, that blessings on each and every one of us and on this whole congregation. We ask you to dismiss us from this place, but never from thy presence. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. All right, I know of no announcements other than we may actually have our meeting.
I've been taking 2 of them strong sinus pills and nothing seems to stop it.
Well, unfortunately, I'm not able to take them either.
They gave me sprays,
There we go.
which I don't think it does any good either.
And the antibiotic that I was given just tore my stomach up. So, I'm glad that's over with finally. The stomach problem is just every now and then, but nothing near like it was, and it goes away. That dental pill works for me, thank goodness. Going for that, I would probably gone to the hospital. I almost did tonight. I almost laid on the client. I'll take this, and I'm gonna drive tonight, and somebody gotta be here, so.
That's fine.
She's not doing too well right now. She's got fluid again, and it's caused a big problem here. It's turned red, leg.
And she's not going back to it, anytime
Don't
soon.
know, and they want her back. We have an appointment Friday. She and I did another. Is there anything else we can talk about? Well, be careful kayaking. Don't hurt yourself.
You're braver than me.
And that should be, oh, I've done it before, it's fun.
Oh, I love it. I had nightmares all night because it's been some years. When I started taking care of Lynn, that went out the window, you know, so. And I only had done it 2 or 3 times, but I told him, I said, I love this. I love this. And so I had nightmares of huge sharks coming upriver just to get me, and giant manta rays raising up and tipping my canoe over. I just had crazy nightmares.
When I went to Kentucky, I went to the Big Sandy Fork of the Russell River, or Russell Fork of the Big Sandy River. And we had whitewater rafting.
I love that too.
I love that. That was more fun. I came home soaked and tired, but it was fun.
I told them I would like to go up to the Ocoee because that's the Olympics. They fixed it up for the Olympics.
That'd be fun.
I loved it. And they have a 2-stage, so it's not quite so bad. But last time it snowed in Kingston, I slid. And I said, you know, this is the thing I'm gonna do until I can.
There's a guy here that visited us that used to live in Kingston and moved down here for his family.
Really?
He visited a couple weeks ago. He lived sat back there. I thought he was from Kingston. It was a Super Sunday. Came and stayed for that. All right, we'll see you Sunday.
Who owns that plantation?
Which one?
The one they're redoing?
I do not know.
I'm so mad at Matt. When we found it, when we first moved here, I said, let's do it, let's get it. Let's refurbish it. Him and Lynn both said, can't be done. It's awful.
Where was it?
It's right up here at the white church, little bitty white church,
What do you mean back then?
down the dirt road.
Oh, yeah, that's, yeah, I've been back there. It was owned by.
Matt said he had been back there and they were redoing it.
Well, they had to. It was owned, there's a lady that owned a whole bunch of, I want to think her name's Miss Pearl. She owned a bunch of land, her family still does.
They said that a lot of that land was owned by somebody, I just didn't know.
She lived there, and then her grandson, who's in Germany, lived in a piece of it. He had made
All the
it.
cleaned out swimming pool and everything, so you had that.
Yeah.
So
But I didn't finish.
now refurbishing it
Wasn't it?
will take a pile of work and money.
Sure.
But when I went by there, Ola took me by there years ago, because that used to be where our dumpsters were.
Oh, okay.
When we had dumpsters,
Yeah.
when you turn like that way, that was where our dumpsters were. And so we trucked, I just want to show you something, we went back, saw Miss Pearl's house, beautiful plantation home.
Good night, y'all be good.
Good night. We trespassed, but,
I would have loved
we went there
to, I would love to,
just to see it when Matt first moved here.
uh-huh.
And,
Oh, you could have probably had it.
well, they both said couldn't be done, it was all